Hello, everybody. It's Ms. Peachy from WCA Biology B, and today we are looking at Unit 2, Lesson 3, Living Things and the Carbon Cycle. So we are kind of continuing discussing the carbon cycle. A lot of this is going to piggyback off of what we did in Lesson 2. We do have a few more keywords in this lesson. We have atmosphere, biomass, biosphere, carbon dioxide, carbon sink, carbon source, geosphere, hydrosphere, keystone species, marine snow, nitrogen, photosynthesis, and plankton. So we'll go ahead and we'll discuss the terms along with the concepts in the upcoming slides here. So just as a reminder, since we are into second semester and some of you are new this semester, I do have a study guide that goes with each one of these recordings. So you'll find the link to the study guide right below the video link on my website as well. So you can access this study guide and you can kind of follow along with today's lesson. So again, piggybacking off of lesson 2, we have a picture, a model, if you will, of the carbon cycle here. And it's kind of going through the different areas of the carbon cycle. We're going to start using words like source and sink here as well. So we have different carbon sources and carbon sinks. So a source is going to be where we get the carbon dioxide from, right? And a sink is a place where carbon dioxide is stored. So we can see here some potential sources. Those are the arrows that are pointing upwards. We have animal respiration, which is a natural carbon source. Plant respiration, which is also a natural carbon source. Keep in mind that all organisms that do cellular respiration do respire and they do give off CO2. Both plants, animals, fungi, etc. do this as well. We also have our factory and vehicle emissions in this picture, which is another carbon source. This is not giving us an entire picture of all the different carbon sources. We also have other natural carbon sources. For example, volcanic activity is a natural carbon source. This is not a natural carbon source, however, and this is the excess of this source is what is causing a problem with the carbon cycle. We also have some carbon sinks as well. The ocean is a very large carbon sink. This is an area where carbon is stored. We also have carbons that is stored in the ground as well. As organisms decay and are buried, carbon becomes stored in the soil, then in the rocks, and it becomes part of our fossils and fossil fuels, which is another sink for carbon. So we can kind of see the different parts of the atmosphere. We have our parts of our environment, excuse me, the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the biosphere, the geosphere, just defining these and talking about kind of what parts of the earth make these up. So you'll notice here the atmosphere is all the gaseous envelope that surrounds the earth. The hydrosphere is the water. Sometimes a different like resources might tell you they might actually break apart the frozen stuff and call it the cryosphere. I've seen that before as well. So if you've seen the word cryosphere, realize that the cryosphere is just a part of the hydrosphere. They're both part of the liquid part of the earth, the water. Biosphere is all living things on earth, and geosphere is the solid earth across the interior, etc. All right, so moving on here, it's talking a bit about some of the sources of carbon through the carbon cycle. We have the process of photosynthesis and cellular respiration, which are opposites of each other, and these are natural ways in which carbon um, is both given off and taken up, basically. So carbon is used in the process of photosynthesis to make sugars. So the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is absorbed and sugars are made. So at that point, the living things themselves become kind of carbon sinks. They're storing the carbon until they decay, right? And then we have the process of cellular respiration, in which you take those living things, those sugars that are produced by plants, and then you metabolize them and you use them to make ATP. And then you give off carbon dioxide. So they are opposite processes. One of them is removing CO2 from the atmosphere, and one of them is recycling that CO2 back into the atmosphere. And then finally, it talks about the oceans and how important they are, that they're very much impacted by the carbon cycle. They cover 70% of the planet's surface. So because they cover such a large surface area, they have a lot of exposure to the atmosphere. Therefore, they absorb a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And it says here, it diffuses directly from the air into the water. As such, the oceans serve as a carbon sink, which is an area where carbon is stored. So this carbon is used in the ocean. It is used by ocean organisms. It is taken up to be part of the bodies of the organisms. Certain plankton will incorporate into their own bodies. They use it to make calcium carbonate, which is a mineral that is used to make shells and skeletons of ocean animals. And when they die and they decompose, this stuff will fall back down to the bottom of the ocean, and it will be used, it will be fed upon by other organisms. And I believe that is talked about right here. So when fish and other organisms in the water column die, they settle to the bottom of the sea. It doesn't explicitly mention the vocabulary from the previous slide, but this falling organic material is known as marine snow. And so that marine snow is very carbon rich. It is used to feed a lot of bottom feeders at the bottom of the ocean. These are detritivores. They feed upon the remains of other organisms, right? They're benthic creatures. They live at the bottom of the ocean. They help to like take that carbon into their bodies as well. And when all organisms decompose at the bottom of the ocean, then that carbon can actually be buried in the sediment at the bottom of the ocean and can be stored in sediment as well, which is another carbon sink. All right, so they have some questions, some check-in questions on this, a couple of those videos that we talked about as well. In this particular video, we're going to be looking at some of the other key terms that were mentioned in that first slide. So make sure you're watching those videos too. Those I do not go through with you in here. And then finally, to talk a little bit about the carbon cycle in another ecosystem, the desert here. So again, looking at where carbon is stored, those are our carbon sinks, and then where carbon is given off, carbon dioxide, and those are our carbon sources. So that is the end of our lesson here, Unit 2, Lesson 3. Hopefully that made sense to you, and let me know if you guys have questions. See you guys in the next one.